So it's Julian Assange's birthday today, the 3rd of July. He was born in 1971, and he's still in Belmarsh prison and awaiting sort of a early next year, another court appearance for the U.S. extradition. I saw somebody say something rather silly today, that Julian Assange helped meddle in the U.S. election, and I actually asked them to please look into independent media instead of watching mainstream media Russiagate nonsense, and gave a list of different independent news sources to look at. Unfortunately, some people really want to commit themselves to that Russiagate narrative, and sometimes I wonder whether people just enjoy the drama, because if people were truly interested in finding out the truth, they wouldn't immediately dismiss something, unless, of course, they're totally propagandized, which wouldn't surprise me. But a lot of people, I think, really love this drama of the Russiagate narrative. They love the fact that there's all sorts of deception and all that kind of thing, and which is really unfortunate, because there is so much deception in relation to that Russiagate narrative. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that now, but so I wanted to really just mention, and I'm not going to spend much time. I've been pretty busy with a sick cat and also a bit of an unwell human. So, and there's Rooney in the background with his Bird Be Safe collar. No, we don't like to dress up our cats. So I haven't had much time really to look at anything, but I hope that that will change in the next few days. But I did notice that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who appears to be the darling of a lot of the Democratic Party now. She went down to to a couple of the child detention facilities where many thousands of children have been separated from their families at the border through the racist policies that were started a long time ago, really. They've actually escalated, like Obama was the deporter-in-chief, they called him, and he deported 2 to 3 million migrants, and so there was, those sort of detention facilities existed, but it has sort of escalated into real full-on concentration camps where children are looking after children, where women are being told to drink out of the toilet. These are in the adult sections. Like, children are basically with other children, and they're not being given adequate food. They're not being given water sometimes, or adequate nutrition. They're looking after one another, like 12-year-olds are looking after toddlers, and it is just a nightmare. They haven't had showers. They're not provided soap or showering facility, to be able to shower. It is a nightmare. Unfortunately, I feel like the Democratic Party is just using this issue. They don't particularly care about these migrants, most of them, but they're using this issue because it's about Trump, because Trump has escalated these racist actions through ICE, and the whole border fiasco, the border wall fiasco, and all of that kind of thing. So that's why it's more about Trump than about these people, and that's what's so disgusting about it. And there are all sorts of things that the Democratic Party, if they truly cared about human rights abuses within the country, or if they really cared about asylum seekers and migrants, they would be doing all sorts of things, including not applauding imperialist wars. But they do applaud imperialist wars. They love them. And they actually, if Donald Trump ever happens to show any sort of reluctance to engage or to continue on with some sort of preemptive strike or something on a country, or looks like he's being reluctant in some way for whatever reason to invade a country, they start trying to harass him. This is the Democratic Party. So anyway, the Democratic Party, I feel like they're making a fuss. And of course, celebrities and all of that take their cues from anything the Democratic Party seem to put forward. But the Democratic Party seem to be making a fuss about this particular issue more so because it's about Trump, and just wanting one more thing to complain about Trump. That's my feelings about it anyway. And because that if the mainstream media is on board with reporting something like this, then it has something to do with either shaming Trump, or something to do with propping up the Democratic Party. and it's got nothing really to do with human rights abuses because they're not that interested in that. And they're also interested in drama because that brings in more advertising, and that's what the mainstream media, the corporate-owned mainstream media, is all about. Getting more advertising. So anything that looks like it's going to be a drama and is something that they're on board with. That's why they'd probably love Trump to win in 2020 because as Les Moonves, who is now the shamed CBS CEO, who was done for sexual harassment, and they got rid of him, but he said that, as much as something to the effect of, as much as it's bad for the country, Donald Trump, it's good for their business. And that's what corporate media is all about now, business, getting advertising from the military-industrial complex, which is, the weapons industry. And I think it was even MSNBC actually hired somebody who is working for the weapons industry. I mean, they hire people, the mainstream media hire people that are ex-CIA people and so forth. So it's all, it's all shitfest, really. So anyway, that's, I just sort of, to think that there are all these children who are going to be psychologically and physically traumatized for the rest of their life by being in these concentration camps, and yes, they are concentration camps, and there's thousands of them, 13,000 or something, young infants. I mean, it's so outrageous, that this is going on and it's taken this long for, well, I don't even know if the Democratic Party, I'm not sure exactly who's got the problem with it now, but anyway, they obviously seem to think it's expedient to have a problem with it, even though Obama was doing similar kinds of things, just not to the lengths that Trump is doing. Anyway, that's always a problem when people fall asleep when a Democratic presidential nominee gets into office. They fall asleep and just ignore what's going on. And I hadn't had the opportunity, I just never got round to it for some reason, and also I didn't want to watch it because I knew it was going to be really awful and very disturbing, and I have trouble with that kind of thing, but I had an opportunity to watch half of the full documentary of the Empire Files about the U.S. Empire's war on the border, with migrants. And I've got halfway through it, and really it's so good. You must watch it because it gives you a really good idea of how, why there are so many Central American migrants coming through to the United States and why they take these dangerous routes. It explains how Mexico was invaded and how it basically, and also about Bill Clinton and NAFTA and how NAFTA has helped create a lot of turmoil in Latin America, and that's another reason why migrants are flooding into America. And of course, then there's the U.S. meddling, the imperialism in Honduras, just the U.S. meddling basically in Latin America has also caused massive migration. There's all these factors which are never ever discussed, of course, by the mainstream media. Never ever discussed. There is never any context to anything, which just feeds into the racist narrative that these people and their countries are incompetent, they're primitive, they don't know how to manage themselves, and so forth. That's what this lack of context, which is intentional, does to these countries from people who also already have racist positions about anybody who isn't white. It reinforces this idea that anybody who isn't white belongs to countries that are a mess, which are run by dictators, which are the people are incapable of looking after themselves, that they're basically wanting to come up and bludge on the U.S. and all this kind of thing. These awful racist narratives. And Trump loves to feed into that. He's really hopeless at a lot of things, but one thing he's very good at is stirring up his base and stirring up that racist narrative that everybody from those countries are rapists and murderers and so forth. And then of course you've got the drug wars. I forgot to mention the drug wars, which have also caused a lot of problems, and they have been the US and the drug wars. That's a whole other story. So anyway, this is the mess now, which is now being exploited by the Trump administration. The terrible, all these children separated from their families who are just trying to flee the disaster that has been made in their home countries by mostly the US meddling and NAFTA and all of that, and then are being made to pay, and they're demonized. And just actually, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that the way they treated her and Rashid Tlaib, which is another congresswoman, she said really exposed how racist they are, because they were really racist towards them even. And so you can imagine what they're like, even though they knew these Congress people were going to come down and look at these detention centers. Even though they knew that, they were still really, really racist. I don't know if they were the same toward Julian Castro. I don't know. But they certainly were towards AOC and Rashid Tlaib. So you can imagine how they are to the children and to the women, and apparently it's really awful how they are. They're incredibly misogynist, just absolutely treat them like animals. So there we have it, another wonderful aspect of, the American exceptionalism everything that is happening in Washington likes to generally ignore everything that's happening in their own country and point the finger at all these other countries after they've caused chaos, and then blame them for reacting in the way they do. That's just typical. And the mainstream media, of course, give no context to anything and just purposely feed into the government narrative, the military-industrial complex narrative, and so forth. So, it's really, really sad, and all these children are suffering, and it's really unbearable to think about it, really. A couple of things I did learn from that documentary by the Empire Files about this U.S. Empire's war on migrants at the border is how they, the ICE, which is a racist organization, ICE, the Border Patrol, they position themselves in areas to make sure that any migrants have to be funneled through the very difficult areas which are, so hazardous for people to travel through. And they've intentionally done it that way. And they think that death, this is literally what they have sort of said, that, they think that death will be a deterrent for these migrants. It turns out that all the deaths aren't a deterrent, because it's actually so difficult for these people that they're willing to risk death going through these terrains. And what the ICE Border Patrol do, too, is they go through, and there's a group called No More Deaths, an American and a US-based group, No More Deaths, who go about and put large bottles, in plastic water bottles, in the desert, in these areas where these migrants are being funneled through these very, very dire sort of areas. And so they place them strategically in different places so that migrants will find them and be able to drink.
Unfortunately, all we've seen is all death and no deterrence. And so in a lot of ways, that policy is successful. Right. It's done exactly what it was meant to do, and it was set out to force people through dangerous areas and to use the desert as a graveyard.
Yeah.
And then if you get through, then you can come and, and work for little pay and be exploited by employers in the U.S., but that's if you get through the gauntlet.
In such brutal conditions, water is heavy to carry and runs out quickly. Coming across water in the desert can literally mean life or death. No More Deaths looks for clues from migrant routes to hide water, such as clothing like the shoes in a backpack we found on the third site we went. Messages of encouragement are written on the bottles. They must be strategically placed so it could be seen by passing migrants, but not too obvious that it could be noticed by Border Patrol or militias, who go out of their way to vandalize and destroy the water, an utterly heinous act, knowing it results in death.
We definitely see an increase when there's more militia in the area, vigilantes, or even hunters during that season. But then when it comes down to it, we know that it's Border Patrol sometimes. They have a memo from their supervisor, from the chief, that they shouldn't vandalize humanitarian aid supplies. We know that it definitely happens.
And you know I don't care. I don't care at all. Not
Please
one
don't
bit.
please don't touch me. So you get a good shot. Picking up this trash somebody left on the trail. It's not yours, is it? All you have to do is tell me, is it yours?
So what's most common is slashing, and so you can see that someone just took like a razor to it and just slashed the whole bottle. Sometimes they're perfectly poured out, just with the lids off, and other times, what's most disturbing is people will write messages on the bottles or do things to the bottles like adding coloring of some sort that makes the water. That who knows what it does to the water, what they're actually adding to it, and makes it so that the water's there, yet in a very cruel way, it's not going to be trusted. I think to destroy water in a desert is one of the most vicious things that you can do for all life. Water is extremely symbolic and significant in the desert. Right. And so I think to destroy it sends a much larger signal. Yes. You know, how anyone could believe that it's okay to kill someone who's trying to feed their family, who's just trying to come and get back to their family. It's beyond me, and I think it really does have to do with racism.
Yeah. People that have been in need of medical attention and have actually been left behind by the people who are leading the pack. Exactly, and that's the people. In terms of the people who die, it usually is because they have been left behind. Yeah. Maybe they tripped and they fell at night, and then they twisted their ankle, and so they can't keep up with the group. Or very commonly, the Border Patrol has a tactic of dusting with helicopters, where they come down upon a group because they know where groups are moving. They can see all of that. And they'll come down and dust them, get really low. And it's this very violent experience where all the rocks and everything is kind of in the air. It's a really loud noise. People are horrified. They scatter. You fall, you run, you get completely lost and completely separated from your group. And that's a way for them to divide the group up and then try to round them up. Or we stop the truck and we look up, and just, on the side of the road was a man that was laying under a tree. And so we jump out of the vehicle and run over to him and are tapping his feet, and he's clearly not dead, and checking his pulse. He's alive, and he's laying there, and we're all around him, and he opens his eyes and he looks up at me, and he says in Spanish, "Are you angels?" And I cry every time I tell the story. And I said, "No, we're here. We're from the church. We're just people that want to help you." And he really had laid down thinking that he was laying down to die that day.
And be able to keep alive, basically. And what the ICE patrols do is they go around and they slash all these water, large. They look like they're about 10 liters in these large containers. I don't know. And they leave quite a few of them in these certain areas. And so the ICE goes around and slashes them, which is just murder, basically. It's murdering these people because they run out of water, and then of course they die of heat stroke. Like one of the people from No More Deaths said that she found one of the people from No More Deaths said that some man had hung himself on barbed wire because he couldn't handle it, couldn't stand the heat stroke and dying of thirst. It's a terrible way to die. Other people go around in circles. This is what happens with heat stroke. They get all disorientated. And some people kill themselves because they can't handle it. There's been thousands of people die, thousands. People dying in these areas where they've forced them to go in desperation, fleeing their country. They're forced into these areas.
Before 1994, there were as few as 5 bodies of migrants found in the Arizona desert per year. Since 1994, state officials have registered over 7,000 human remains, over 200 per year. But many of the bodies are never found. Because the traditional points of entry are now militarized, people have no choice but to go on the most perilous journeys through the desert, risking their lives in extreme temperatures for days, sometimes weeks, with an array of dangers.
Where they risk death just to get away from the situation they're at. And they found young children, like a 14-year-old girl, face down, and they have, they have many, many hundreds that they can't even sort of recognize, and because they've been laying there for a couple of years and they've degraded, and so there's only bones left. But fortunately, there's that organization and also some associated organizations that are trying to keep a record of these people. And apparently, when they finally identify who these people are that have died, and they find their relatives, the relatives are actually grateful to them, telling them that their son has died or whatever, because they had no idea what happened to them. That's how awful it is that people are grateful and happy to find out that their son has died. I'd like to do a post just about that, and sort of really, because I haven't finished this documentary, and I really, it brought me to tears. It's really, really difficult to watch, and it's so, I mean, this is the sort of thing that, you imagine brown shirts doing to people. People don't like to use the whole Nazi idea of things, there's using Nazis as a comparison. But this is it's Nazi-esque behavior is what is going on. And ICE is a racist, an outright racist organization that should be dismantled. So, if people, if anybody had a clue about this issue, instead of blaming migrants and doing that whole racist trope about them, they would look into how this has occurred, when it started, why it started, and then do something about that, because that is what, the destruction via U.S. Meddling in U.S. colonialism and imperialism, etc., and dreadful economic policies like NAFTA that Bill Clinton brought in 1994, has destroyed some of these, has destroyed definitely Mexico, has ruined a lot of farming there, and that's what's happened. It's economically destroyed Mexico. So, unfortunately, they have a new leader now, AMLO, and I'm hoping, and he's trying to reverse neoliberalism in that country, and good wishes to him to do that. I'm surprised that they haven't been trying to assassinate him, the U.S., as fast as they can, but he managed to get in, and hopefully that will make some difference. But anyway, please watch that program. I will leave a link in the information section of this video. It's really important to get an idea of how this situation with migrants has originated, so that you can tell others, so that you can share that information and repost the Empire Files full documentary, which is really brilliant. And just about that group, No More Deaths, which would be good to support No More Deaths. Apparently there was a person, his name is Scott. Oh, what's his name? Gosh, I've forgotten his name. Scott is his first name anyway. And he was taken to court, and over giving aid to two people and sheltering them. They were migrants. Basically, he gave aid and possibly saved their life. And they took him to court on felony charges. This is how crazy it is. You get done for aiding the homeless in the U.S. in some states, and you get done now, and felony charges brought against you because you try to save people from dying in the desert. I mean, that's how crazy it is there. So this guy, Scott, who's from No More Deaths, he managed, there was a hung jury, so I don't know if they're going to continue on that trial again and retry him. I think they might be. But this is the level of it's a monstrosity what's going on there. That people who are trying to save people from dying in the desert due to racist policies, racist domestic policies, and policies that have affected their country and destroyed a lot of their country. They're trying to flee their country because of these awful policies that have helped destroy their country, like NAFTA. That's what's going on, and these people that are trying to help these poor people who are just like us, just trying to etch out a life and have some sort of decent life or get together with their families, who actually drive the U.S. economy. That's the other irony of it. A lot of these undocumented migrants are actually working in hotels. They're actually being enslaved in some way, like given slave kind of wages in some instances, and being exploited by the capitalist class. It's just like, what a mess. But anyway, so, you know, please share that documentary wherever anybody starts going on and on about, oh, these migrants, you know, we need to fix the migrant problem, or they like to call them in a disdainful way, they like to call them illegal aliens or whatever. You know, these really sort of off names. They're not illegal aliens, they're people. Anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. I was going to talk about a couple of other things, but I might just leave it here, and I'll talk about them hopefully soon. It makes me so sad to see this kind of thing, you know, going on with and being exploited by the Democratic Party to a certain extent. Not that I'm saying everybody in the Democratic Party doesn't care about these migrants and that they're being cynically using this issue just because it's some other thing they can go on about Trump. It's all about winning in 2020. I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but this is pretty much, I'd say, I'm not even saying that AOC is doing it for that reason. I think she does care, but she seems to pick and choose what she looks at. And I think she picks and chooses what the Democratic Party are okay with in a way. So, you know, I might be wrong with that, but that's sort of a feeling I get. Anyway, so that's all I wanted to say. So please click the subscribe button if you like the content and the notifications bell, otherwise you don't receive any updates. And please leave comments. I always enjoy your comments. So thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time. Bye for now.